Good day, everyone. Into this discussion, we're going to talk about chapter 17, which is Misfortunes in Madrid. So, ini nga chapter, ini ang pinaka-most difficult periods sa life ni Rizal. So, yung chapter na to it's called Misfortunes in Madrid kasi during the years of 1890 to 1891, while staying in Madrid, Jose Rizal, naka-experience in many painful events all at once. And, these misfortunes were not only personal, but also political. He was trying to, fight for justice for his family and the Calamba tenants. But at the same time, he was receiving heartbreak news from home. Rizal also lost his friends, facing conflicts with fellow Filipinos, and suffering from emotional pain from Rivera. Okay? So parang ini nga period is ini nag-test kan Rizal patience, character, and commitment to the Filipino cause. Okay, so first major disappointment ni Rizal sa Madrid is failure to get justice for the family. So pag-abot niya nga sa Madrid in August 1890, nag-aro siya agad bulig from the reformist groups and liberal newspapers. Okay, so ini nga mga organizations, they were known to, support justice and reforms in Spanish colonies. So, ano kaya yung reason? The reason is that Rizal wanted to secure justice for the oppressed Calamba tenants and his family. Okay, yung mga Calamba tenants, sila yung mga farmer yung nag-uupahan sa land. Okay, so at this time kasi yung mga Dominican friars, they were evicting tenants in Calamba due to a land dispute. Okay, so Rizal believed na by exposing these abuses in Spain, yung mga Spanish public at saka yung government would help and would intervene. But despite using all legal and peaceful means, Rizal's efforts did not succeed. So yun yung pinaka-major disappointment ni Rizal. Okay, so Rizal, together with Marcelo H. Del Pilar, acting as his lawyer, and Domenador Gomez as secretary, personally went to the Spanish Minister of Colonies, Senor Fabie. So doon, they protested the abuses committed by Governor General Valeriano Weyler and the Dominicans. However, as the slide says, diba, nothing happened. Nothing came out of Rizal's interview with the minister. And because of that, there's a Madrid newspaper which is El Resumen. Describe nila ito yung Spanish colonial policy, which is to cover the ears, open the pores, and fold the arms. So, ini nga quote, this is his strong criticism of government's indifference. It means na instead of listening to the complaints and help to solve problems, yung mga authorities just ignore the issue. They spent money in a very useless ways and did nothing meaningful. So, Rizal is correct niya talaga makuha yung justice na yun. He was not asking for luxury or privilege. Ang correct lang ni Rizal is yung fairness for his family and the poor tenants of Calamba. While Rizal was fighting in Madrid, worse news came from Calamba. So, yung brother-in-law niya na si Silvestre Ubaldo sent him a copy of the ejectment order issued by the Dominican against Francisco Rizal, or the father of Rizal, and other Calamba tenants. So, it means, they were being ordered to leave the land. And then, Saturnina informed Rizal na sina Pasiano Rizal, Antonio Lopez, Silvestre Ubaldo, Teong, and Dandoy were deported to Mindoro after being arrested in Calamba and shipped out of Manila on September 6, 1890. Now, even more painful nibaroan ni Rizal nga yung parents niya is forcibly ejected from their home. And now, Rizal's parents had to live in the house of Narcesa. So, diba, ini nga chapter is this one of the saddest part kasi Rizal was suffering from a distance. He was far away. His family was being punished. Diba? We can never really imagine being in another country tapos trying to help your family, the poor tenants, just only to receive a letter saying na your parents have been removed from their own home. Diba? And your relatives have been deported. So, parang that kind of pain is, both personal and political. Diba? Yung mga justice nga correct na makuha, it's not only about abstract or it's not about theoretical. May mga real victims. Okay, so and this also, helps us understand na yung kay Rizal cause was urgent. Kasi yung Calamba issue is not only about the land. It was about the abuse of power, the suffering of the tenants, and the destruction of family stability. So after hearing the bad news, Rizal tried again. Nag-aro siya bulik from the liberal Spanish statesmen like si Becerra and Maura, which is he hoped na people with influence in Spain might support or might help him. But again, Rizal was disappointed. Kasi they only give Rizal sympathy. Sympathy, not real actions. Yung nag-offer sila mga polite words, but no solution. And with that, Rizal realized and learned that sympathy without responsibility cannot solve injustice. Now, his friend Ferdinand Blumentritt even urged Rizal to seek the Queen Regent Maria Cristina. Okay, so si Queen Regent Maria Cristina was ruling Spain at that time. But again, Rizal did not have any connections. Rizal did not have any connections or wealth needed to reach this queen. Okay? So, pinapakita lang dito na yung colonial systems, they often favor the powerful and they only ignore those ordinary people. So, the next misfortunes was the death of Jose Maria Panganiban. Jose Maria Panganiban is one of Rizal's close co-workers in the propaganda movement. Namatay si Panganiban in Barcelona on August 19, 1890 after a long illness. And of course, Rizal deeply mourned his death. Kasi Panganiban was young, he was talented, patriotic, and full of promise and hope. Parang consider si Panganiban as one of the hopes of the Philippines. Kumbaga yung death niya is not only personal loss for Rizal, but also a loss for the reform movement. So, Rizal, nagsurat siya sin powerful eulogy for Panganiban. So in that tribute, i-emphasize niya to ang patriotism ni Panganiban, yung intelligence, yung youth niya, and then the love of the country. So, Rizal also mourned the fact na Panganiban namatay siya far from home, separated from family. Diba? And namatay si Panganiban, mayroon siya hopes for the future. Kumbaga parang yung friend ni Rizal na si Panganiban it's not just a dead friend. Kumbaga parang it's a symbol. He was a symbol of lost Filipino talent. Kasi yung grief ni Rizal, it became a national grief. Kasi yung view niya nga yung death ni Panganiban as a loss to the whole country. Now, on the same date, the previous year, Feliciano Gonzalez Timbang also died. So, Rizal described this as a tragic coincidence for the Filipino in Europe. Right, so next misfortune is the aborted duel with Antonio Luna. So in this case, diba, pinapakita dito yung sense of honor ni Rizal. So at the social reunion of Filipinos in Madrid, there was wine served. Okay, so Antonio Luna became drunk, nahubog siya. So because of his frustration and romance with Nelly Boosted, Luna made offensive remarks about Nelly. Yes, and sinisisi ni Antonio Luna si Rizal. So, nung narinig ni Rizal yung insult na yon, in-challenge niya sa duel si Antonio. Kasi di kaya ni Rizal i-tolerate yung disrespect na yon toward a woman. Okay, so, si Antonio Luna kasi mas magaling siya sa sword kaysa kay Rizal. So, hingan si Antonio Luna siya ang challenge. So Antonio Luna had a choice to use sword against Rizal. So if logically if pinili yun ni Antonio Luna, then Rizal's lives would be put in danger, 'di ba? So pero yung duel na yun was aborted. So and in this case, it reveals two things about Rizal. First is, he was not a coward. Rizal was willing to defend honor if it placed him in danger. And second, he was also someone who valued women's dignity deeply. For Rizal kasi, yung insulting women was not a small matter. Pero yung duel na yun did not happen. Kaya nga, yung duel na yun was aborted kasi nung nimasmasan na si Luna, na-realize niya yung mistake niya. Nag-apologize siya and then Rizal accepted the apology. Now, their friendship was restored. And with that, I would say na Rizal was, Jose Rizal was both brave and reasonable. Diba? For defending a woman and for accepting the apology. Diba? Alright, so another aborted duel is with Wenceslao y Ritana. So Rizal also had a conflict with Wenceslao y Ritana, which is a Spanish scholar and press agent of the friars. Kumbaga, si Ritana, siya ang Rizal's better enemy of the pen. And Ritana regularly in-attack niya yung mga Filipinos in the newspaper, including Rizal himself. So, in one article in La Época, doon niya ni Ritana, he falsely, claim niya nga to yung family ni Rizal at saka yung mga relatives, mga friends ni Rizal na yung palayas ko na sila kasi di sila nagbabayad sa rent. So, kumbaga, parang yung insult na yun, kumbaga parang hindi yun hinayaan ni Rizal. Kumbaga parang it was not only about the attacks on Rizal's family, but also it was attack on their, reputation and dignity. So, because of that, Rizal sent his seconds to Ritana, again challenge niya sa duel. So, Rizal wanted Ritana to apologize or face the consequences. So, Ritana, however, chose to retract his statement and nag-apologize siya publicly in the newspapers kasi doon ay baruan ni Ritana nga Rizal, mas magaling si Rizal both in pistol and sword. So, waray laban si Ritana. So, the result was that the duel was avoided. And then after siton, si Ritana is nagbago siya. He eventually became more respectful towards Rizal. And then even nag-write pa siya sin biography kay Rizal. In-recognize niya ito yung greatness ni Rizal. So, yun. So another misfortunes or bad news is about Rizal's deepest personal heartbreak in Madrid. So in the autumn of 1890, nawara ang kan Rizal gold watch chain nga mayon picture ni Leonor Rivera. So kumbaga parang itong pala nga loss, parang it's already felt like a bad omen or a bad sign. So in December 1890, nagsurat si Leonor Rivera kay Rizal, and then ginsugad niya nga to nga she was going to marry kuno a British engineer. So Leonor Rivera asked for his forgiveness, and for Rizal, this was a devastating emotional blow. Kasi Leonor Rivera had been Rizal's sweetheart for 11 years. That is a very long relationship. Parang yung news na yon, yung sulat ni Rivera, naturally caused deep pain. So Rizal was not only fighting political battles, but Rizal also suffered a private emotional tragedy. He was stunned, heartbroken, and unable to speak about it immediately. So yung friend niya na si Ferdinand Blumentritt, di ba na-mention ko siya kanina, siya nagsugat kay Rizal nga mag-ask help sa Queen. So si Ferdinand Blumentritt, yung comfort niya nga to si Rizal by telling him na after everything else, Rizal now had lost the woman he loved. But ginremind niya to ni Blumentritt si Rizal yung real higher love or woman ni Rizal, which is motherland. So, and with that, connect niya nga ang personal heartbreak ni Rizal to his patriotic life. So in a way, naging transform ni Rizal yung private pain na yun into public purpose. Alright, so another one is Rizal Del Pilar rivalry. So toward the end of 1890, a rivalry developed between Rizal and Marcelo H. Del Pilar. Okay, so si Rizal, considered siya as one of the most talented Filipino leader in Europe, while Del Pilar naman was gaining respect in Madrid because of his powerful editorials in La Solidaridad. And Del Pilar also purchased La Solidaridad from Pablo Rianzares. He also replaced Graciano Lopez Haina as editor. Yung issue kasi nila is direla siya about personal competition, but it was also about the leadership style, political direction, and the future of the propaganda movement. Okay, so ang leadership ni Rizal, naniniwala siya nga Filipinos should have moral standards, should have dignity and self-sacrifice if they wanted the respect of the Spaniards and to strengthen the reform movement. However, some of the Filipinos is nadiri kay Rizal, nadiri sila sa idealism ni Rizal. Baga parang gin-interfere ni Rizal and private lives ng mga Filipinos. Because some of the Filipinos preferred wine, women, cards. Baga parang nag-shift ang karang support niya to kay Del Pilar. So that made division. So, and pinapakita dito na diba yung among reformists, unity talaga is very difficult if people have different values and priorities. Si Rizal kasi, very disciplined, cognizant discipline, while others naman wanted more flexible approach. And ang Del Pilar's editorial policy kasi is nagko-contradict sa Rizal political views. So because the split between Rizal and Del Pilar was becoming more dangerous, the Filipinos in Madrid held a meeting on New Year's Day, January 1, 1891, to prevent a full breakup. So about 90 Filipinos attended. So they decided to choose a leader called the responsable, which is yung job would be to direct the Filipino community and to help determine the editorial direction of La Solidaridad. So, yung political moment na yun, diba, yung pinapakita dito yung reform movement, they were trying, to save itself from internal conflict. So, si Del Pilar, gin-oppose niya nga ito nga put an La Solidaridad under the control of the responsable because he said it was a private enterprise. But still, Del Pilar agreed na yung paper should publish the aspirations, and the demands of the Filipino people. Because of his objection of Del Pilar, the proposal about control was abandoned. So yung group is nagmove on to choosing a leader. Yung idea kasi ng responsable, I think parang very meaningful siya kasi doon pinapakita dito na yung mga Filipino community in Madrid was trying to organize itself politically. Na diri sila nga ini nga movement is mag-collapse because of rivalry between Rizal and Del Pilar. The election for responsable happened in the first week of February 1891. The Filipinos were divided into two camps, which is the Rizalistas and the Pilaristas. So Rizal on the first day was winning, but he did not immediately get the required 2/3 votes. So in the third day na, si Mariano Ponce is yung convince niya he used his eloquence, diba? Yung persuasion niya para i-convince yung mga Filipinos na i-vote si Rizal. And because of that, finally, Rizal got the needed support and Rizal became the responsable. And what makes this part remarkable in Rizal's response is that after niya magdaog, in-refuse niya to accept the position. Kasi nadiri siya maging leader sa divided group. Kasi maaram siya nga some of the supporters of this Del Pilar is nadiri sa kanya. So he did not want niya kanya leadership is maging source of bitterness. Diba? So pinapakita dito na yung sense of delikadesa ni Rizal. Diba? Instead of clinging to power, nag-step aside siya for the sake of the unity. Okay, so after Rizal declined the leadership, Rizal wrote a short note which is gimpasalamatan niya nga mga Filipinos niya. And then he packed his things, paid his bills, and boarded the train to Biarritz. So that moment was not just a simple departure. It was a farewell to Madrid, wherein yung Madrid is a city where he had once been happy during sa kanya first stay, but had been become unhappy during his second stay. So the chapter ends with a very emotional tone because it was the last time he saw Madrid. The city had become a place of disappointment, conflict, heartbreak, and unresolved suffering. But leaving Madrid did not mean leaving his mission. In fact, ining hardships is naging kanyang na-experience is ginamit niya ito, ipinalakas niya ito para sa dedication niya towards the Filipino cause. Alright, so that's all for the chapter 17, the misfortunes in Madrid. I hope you learned something. Thank you, everyone.